lot of people really don't like Randy Fine.
Well, there's that. And that is, let me tell you, as somebody,
Republicans.
I appreciate running against a hated person. Like I can appreciate that. But what are the key issues like that you're focusing on? Because I'm sure that they're like working people issues.
The main issue is the economy. The main issue is money. Is that, voters, asked for relief in their wallets. They asked for help with groceries. They asked for help with housing costs. They asked for help with insurance costs, and they got the Gulf of America. Working families said they can't, they're struggling to afford food, and the president cut all funding for school lunches, in addition to funding for many, many other things. But, things that hurt you at home. We've had a lot of people concerned about the environment, particularly coming from Republicans when we've talked to them. And obviously during the primary, since we have closed primaries here, we were only targeting Democratic doors when we were out. But you can't walk neighborhoods in District 6 and not run into Republicans. We've had a lot of great conversations. A lot of people are really open. Because either they don't know who Randy Fine is, or they know who Randy Fine is, which is oftentimes worse.
I would think with
they're unhappy. They're unhappy with the immediate changes and results they've gotten post having voted for Trump.
I would think, with very few exceptions, most people wouldn't be big on him. And for people, he's a hardcore Zionist. He's just like, he's horrible.
He's also really the most outspoken opponent of Ron DeSantis in the Republican Party.
That's true.
And a lot of these Republicans like Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. Well, that's their governor, and a lot of people, especially when, you have your party and you're into your party, that just comes off as extremely disloyal. And so people don't like that. It's not a good look.
No. Josh, can you talk on this significant issue, which I actually think is playing into the reason why you probably will cross 2 million, and that this actually is a race, despite the fact that the numbers suggest otherwise, because of the breakdown of the voting demos. But I think that this is probably a race that has the potential to be competitive for this reason. Evidently, Randy has been kind of effing up significantly on an issue that is very important to Republican voters, especially in the South. And that, of course, is immigration. And apparently he's been very two-faced about this. One of the things about Florida immigration is that people get very concerned because this is a very agriculturally rich state, but the people that own, like the orange groves and Big Sugar, they always want people working in the fields that'll work for pennies on the dollar. And so while it may be misguided in terms of their angle pertaining to whether they think that it's just a question of removing illegal immigrations, it goes without saying that this is an issue that, despite him having Trump's endorsement, he has really been making a significant amount of enemies at a time where it's probably not a very good idea if you're going up against a special election opponent who has money and a ground game behind him.
Well, so first off, he made a lot of enemies right out the gate because, as has been revealed and confirmed later, he did not have Trump's endorsement when he first claimed he did. So when he first entered and rushed in and he had that whole speech, Donald Trump called me and asked me to be his warrior. All been confirmed that was not true. And he cleared the primary for himself, clearing out a lot of local Republicans who are a lot more well-liked in the district. Which made a lot of enemies in the local RECs here. There's a lot of people, we've spoken to members in the RECs who are really upset that he came in and he basically stole the nomination from other people that they would have liked to see in this race. So
I put it up there so people can see him. This guy's a complete piece of shit. Yes. I've been following him for years, and he's been a complete piece of shit for years. And there have been many issues on. I've never thought he was correct on something. Let's say that.
He got roasted earlier today on a conservative media show, caught up in all of his lies about the immigration and the immigration bill over and over again. It is, it was delightful to watch.
Yeah. You have to use it. Like, I know, like, I really am a fan of taking the high road and focusing on your issues and what's important. And you have to do that. But unfortunately, you have to go and put out the shit, especially to his people, about him.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's not
delicate,
good.
like where the messaging has to be very delicate in how we do it, because we don't want to put anyone on the defensive.
Well,
right? We don't want them to become defensive of Randy Fine.
No, it has to be policy based. It can't be personal, and it has to be professional and policy based from the perspective of how it affects them. It can't be personal.
The easier thing so far has really been selling them on me over him. Coming in as, my background, I'm a public school teacher. I've worked in Title I and at-risk schools for 13 years. I'm on school leadership team at a Title I school in Osceola County. I spent my career, working in education, and, as schools continue to get more difficult to navigate, a really clear example of just how rapidly it's been getting bad is my job title this year is, and I'm on a leave of absence right now for the campaign, but my job title at my school is instructional coach / dean of students / MTSS coordinator. And 3 years ago when I started at this school, those were 3 different people's jobs. But we continue to lose allocations. We continue to struggle with funding. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, Ron DeSantis has done 3 mandatory teacher raises over the last 5 years. Now, I cannot say that I am not appreciative of that money, $1,000 each time. But the assumption people have when they see, hey, we're going to give $1,000 a year extra to every teacher is that, oh, he's increasing the budget. He has not increased the budget. The budget has stayed the same. Per student funding has stayed the same. So if you have a school our middle school has 75 teachers, and you raise every teacher's salary by $1,000, but you don't raise the budget, we have to make $75,000 worth of cuts. We lose a dean and a para, and so every year, every time, we are losing allocations and losing positions and people to support our teachers, to keep our schools safe, because the budget's not going up. And it gets more and more difficult each year to navigate as a result of that. So education is my number one issue. Education is what brought me into this race, knowing that the Trump administration was planning on dissolving the Federal Department of Education, and then ultimately, in the days after the November election, when it was released in writing that the way they were going to navigate that, the way that they were going to deal with the loss of the infrastructure of the Department of Education, because there are over 97,000 public schools in the country. And you're talking about a federal department that is connected and directly funds with the federal supplemental funding that each school receives to each individual school. How do you navigate that when you cut the department? Sure, you can move, who regulates IDEA and students with disabilities over to Health and Human Services. Like, you can move and shift, 504 plans and student civil rights over to Department of Justice, but who navigates the money, the infrastructure? And what was ultimately revealed is that they're not going to, is that they're just going to say, hey, all right, Florida has this many schools and they get this much money in total. And so we're just going to give it all to the state, and the governor can disperse it as he sees fit. And there is no state in this nation that is more dangerous in than Florida, because we have 6 years of evidence that Ron DeSantis will take every penny he can out of public schools and give them to privates and charters.
Yeah.
So it is going to absolutely cripple our public schools here in this state. And it's an issue that is not partisan. It's not only going to affect the parents of Democratic voters. It's going to affect absolutely everyone. It doesn't matter who you voted for or what party you're registered to. If you have kids or grandkids in public schools, they are screwed. Like it's going to be bad. And that's the issue that we're bringing to people.
Yeah, one thing that really pisses me off, and I don't think a lot of people realize this. So Florida is somewhere like hovering around 48th in education. I mean, like we're low, right? Like we're bad, right?
We were 48th for a long time. I believe at last year's numbers, we finally made 50. Like we finally got passed by West Virginia and Mississippi.
Absolute shit is my point. Okay. So here's what really is very frustrating as somebody who is a Floridian. Okay. So the other states that are in the bottom, and I've looked at this over years, and I haven't looked recently, but over years, tend to be poor states, tend to be the states that have the least amount of financial resources. So
West
therefore
Virginia,
they have
Alabama.
Yeah. And yet we as Florida are one of the richest states in the country. I think we're like third. We're okay.
Well, we're in the top 10 though.
Okay. So then in theory, we should at least have a better education, but yet we have the worst education. And the other states that have higher, that are like us in terms of having wealth, generally tend to have better education. So what that says to me, I call that de facto corruption. That's de facto corruption. We have the money, we have the resources, and yet we choose to not allocate it to where it's needed. That's corruption. And so to me, Florida is specifically worse. Yeah. Because when you look at, say, it's like Mississippi, I expect them to be at the bottom on education. They have the least amount of resources.
And one of the reasons is because we haven't had a Democratic governor since 1998. So some of these other states have had, small stretches where a Democrat's in there, a Democrat increases funding. Republicans can get away with not increasing funding. They're scared to death of cutting funding. But I mean, just inflation has done everything. Like, if you're not increasing the budget and just inflation exists, we're going to continue to drop. And, it's just usually a shocking stat for people when we're out talking to voters on any side. A lot of people don't look up or know. Most voters aren't as educated on issues like education or things like that, where they know, like, hey, where does Florida stand in per student funding, or where does our education rank? And if you ask them, like, around what states do you think, they usually say, they're like, oh, well, we have to be in that group of like California, New York, Texas, New York, right? They never guess that we're in the group of West Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama.
Yeah.
And that's deliberate.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. I first of all have a whole different concept of education. Like, to me, that should just be something that every few years, a panel of very smart people gets together and decides how much it would cost, what is needed to educate a student. And then that cost is regionalized. And then that money is subsidized by the federal government and shouldn't be related to property taxes. And every child should get the same quality of education to be managed locally. But anyway,
remember, part of the problem in Florida is that because we're such an agricultural state, they really want to keep people as lower educated as possible because they want them to take menial jobs that don't pay well. And so that's also part of the change that obviously needs to come. But I think listen, anything is possible. I know everyone just looks at the numbers and say, well, it's a plus 19 district, this, that, and the other thing. Look, you do have a handful of things that are working in your favor. This is a special election, so it's kind of it's a short-term thing. Randy Fine is not particularly popular.
You're running against this douche. Look at this guy.
And on top of everything else, Josh, and I'm not saying this because I think that it's a strictly regional thing, but who in the flying fuck gives a damn about Zionism in your congressional district? That's an issue for where Jen was running.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Honestly, we've gotten a lot of Republicans as well, and people who said that, they're upset with the Biden administration, they're upset with the Trump administration, both of them, because, they're seeing nothing come to them, right? They're asking for help on issues. They're asking for, with food, with housing, with insurance, being the three primary ones here in Florida. And they're watching money go out to Israel and to Ukraine and other places. And whether you support the cause of that country or not, it's the idea, right? If you have a hat that says America first on it, and you voted for people who told you we have to put America first and Americans first, and then you as American asked for help and they said no the same day they sent $80 billion to a nuclear superpower wealthy nation on the other side of the world, like, they get pissed off.
And you're talking like somebody who actually understands what it means to win in your given congressional district. The biggest problem that I think the Democratic Party faces today, granted, I think the Democratic Party is dying, but that's a whole other story, is that there is a very big problem that doesn't exist in the GOP that does exist in the Democratic Party. And that is, you run on a universal message that is supposed to work every place in the United States. That does not work. So you are not running to be the congressional representative of Pacific Heights, San Francisco, like Nancy Pelosi is. It is a completely different world that you are looking to represent. Yeah. So if you are in a congressional district where speaking favorably of Donald Trump is going to help you to win, then you do what the fuck you have to do in order to win. You may like Trump personally in some respects. You may not like him. But if you just turn into a whole Trump is Hitler shit,
it won't work.
Don't believe that, but they do it anyway because they think that that's what the National Democratic Party establishment wants you to have.
It's not
if
good.
Ken Martin, listen, I've got issues with Ken, especially with that good billionaire statement. But at the end of the day, if he gives you the reins to run your own race and say, this is what it's going to take to keep that Zionist scumbag out of Congress, then that's what has to be done.
Yeah, you can't keep harping on Trump because the truth is that it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary.
And this is a district where, again, like the voters are not, they're not in the dark of the fact that they've been politically neglected, right? Like they recognize this.
Yeah.
Now, I've found there are some areas, particularly in like Volusia County and Flagler County over here, which I think is closer to where like Waltz's kind of base was, where I've met some Republicans and other people who said that like Waltz or some people from his offices have helped them. But the farther I get away from it, like you get over to the Ocala side and they're like, they couldn't pick that dude out of a lineup. You know, we were in Palatka a couple of weeks ago and we were eating at Coley's Diner. It's a nice little diner that I think everyone in that area knows. And needless to say, everyone in the diner was Republican. And we've got all our signs and all our swag and all our stuff. So, you know, just having the conversation, you know, when we start talking to the waitress and the waitress tells me she's got 4 kids and she's scared to death of what's going to happen to schools because like she can't afford to send them to a private school. Like even with step-up scholarships, like step-up scholarships don't cover everything. And she's got 4 don't cover everything. You know, we had, there was an older gentleman there who was disgusted by the idea of a Democrat eating with him, but then started talking to us anyway. And, you know, we just brought up the issue, you know, like, you like Donald Trump? And he's like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, you think Donald Trump's policies are best for America? And he's like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, okay, so assuming you're right and just holistically, wholesale, overall, Donald Trump's policies are best for America. You still need someone to make sure that you're protected in Palatka. Just because they're best for America wholesale doesn't mean they're going to be best for every single place in America. Right?
That's true.
And
yeah.
You need someone representing you to protect your rights and interests in Palatka. And he looks at me and he's like, I love Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis don't even take care of Palatka. Like, they get this. They recognize that no one is there for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly,
I think that they do. I think that the issue is a lot of people are just so turned off by Democrats in general and just the sanctimonious elitist bullshit that they project and the over woke shit. And so many people are really sick of it. But they're still open to populist working class policies. So it isn't so much that they don't know policy. Nobody talks with them about policy. They just know that they like someone like Trump.
Yeah. I don't think I have one in this room. We have so the lit that we bring out to Republican and MPA doors in like in big red letters on the back of the card, it says it's a black background, and in big red letters it says "the only Democrat I like." And when we're approaching and talk to them, it's like, look, you don't have to become a Democrat. You don't have to start liking all the Democrats, right? You're allowed to have one, right? You can have one guy. I can be your one. I'll be your guy because I'm not here to push the party agenda. I'm not here to, push Nancy Pelosi or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or anyone else's agenda.
Honestly, you should just call yourself the Democrat Thomas Massie, and
you're working for
how far that would get you.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to separate yourself from that sanctimonious elitist shit and be a working class representative.
I can be your guy. I just happen to be a Democrat.